Well, that didn't take long, did it? While I never thought it had much life in it, seeing it vanish in less time than the duration of the average British summer was a shock. I refer, of course, to the mask slipping from the Labour Party, as this will go down as the week we saw their true face. Gone was the Glasto-loving, group-hugging, copper-promising, trident-scrapping, victim-empathising, youth-embracing, NHS-saver, teacher-worshipping, nation-defending look. In came the true pro-Marxist, rabble-rousing, cunning and conniving stance of the modern-day Labour Party, hell-bent on overturning a democratically elected government by the means of a class war, large-scale civil disobedience, wave of strikes, whatever it takes. Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell's offensive suggestion the victims of Grenfell Tower, quotes, were murdered, was as egregious as it was false. However, it did serve a purpose. Like a scab, you don't have to pick for too long to reveal the real Labour Party.
You just can't help yourself, can you?
Telling the truth? No,
it's a brilliant introduction, though, wasn't it?
My headline writing course from last week.
Rabble-rousing. What else was there?
Oh, I don't remember.
Yeah. How long did it take you?
I was on the Sun. What do you mean trying to get into fiction?
How long did it take you to write that?
Don't tell the producer about 5 minutes while I'm on the radio. God, I'm late for that. Let's just do that. Do what, Doris?
He does virtually the same every day.
Right, so you've knocked my work.
Yeah. So, anyway, what I will say, Nick, yes. As much as I thought what you just read out was a bunch of nonsense, there is a bit of it that I do agree with.
Right.
In that I do think that John McDonnell's language was ill-judged.
Yep.
And I actually disagree. I mean, David Lammy is a very good friend of mine, and I disagree with David's stance on saying that we actually need to prosecute individuals, because I think the danger around all of this is that's when you get a cover-up.
And let's just, for viewers who are not familiar, and I'll come straight back to you, let's just see. This is John McDonnell, Shadow Chancellor. It is filmed by someone using Twitter, so the quality's not great, but he's at Glastonbury. Let's hear what he says.
Is democracy working? It didn't work if you were a family living on the 20th floor of Grenfell Tower. Those families, those individuals, 79 so far, and there'll be more, were murdered by political decisions that were taken over recent decades.
Tragically, he was right on one thing. We now stand at 80, and I think all parties except it will get higher.
It will increase, yeah. So for me, I agree with you there. I think it was ill-judged. But I think actually what Labour needs to do, rather than using words like murder and calling individuals out to be prosecuted, they actually need to put together a proper report to look at the results of austerity. Let's look at that, because when we start blaming individuals which are likely to be low-level management, that's when you allow people, the whole system, to get away with it.
June, language such as that, and it's
I
got to be
agree with you.
disgraceful.
The language is disgraceful.
The thing is, it's not ill-judged, the language. It was utterly disgraceful, because what it does is it creates a massive divide. It fuels the anger that already rightly exists within the victims' families and people living up and down the country in buildings that we now realise maybe aren't fit to live in. And I think it's horrendous that people in such positions as him feel that they can use that sort of language. I'm not interested in the politics.
But
I'm interested in the fact that he's prepared to...
We cannot deny, though, that it is Tory policy.
No,
it's not Tory policy. It goes back. This goes back 30 years. This goes back 30, 40 years.
You know for a fact that one of the key policies was brought in under Tony Blair's government. All the three major parties have played their role in this sort of housing. When the Lib Dems were in coalition, none of them, and quite frankly, when I saw Jeremy Corbyn going after Mrs May and Prime Minister's questions, when you have still got people picking through the ashes, trying to bring out... that was bloody shameful, because now is not the time to score political points. Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Can I just show Mrs May's reply? Because I think you ought to see what Mrs May said when to this allegation.
What all of those affected by Grenfell Tower deserve is an inquiry that gets to the truth and provides them with the truth and with knowing who was responsible. There are real issues here. We're not going to get to the truth by pointing fingers. We will by calm determination.
My problem with John McDonnell is when he was an old lefty agitprop MP, no one took any notice of him anyway. He went on and he said things like that. He is now the Shadow Chancellor. You can't say things like that because you can't demonstrate it's true as yet. You've got to wait for the inquiry. You've got to wait and see what it says and all sorts of things. I mean, you know, when you look at what's happened over Hillsborough this week, just this week, that took 25 years. Now, hopefully, this inquiry will come up. I mean, the inquiry changed football. The Hillsborough inquiry, just like King's Cross changed the
tube travel.
Tube travel,
and I've no doubt that this inquiry will fundamentally change housing in this country.
But it's not the time to politicise.
No, but you don't. But I just don't believe. I mean, you know, John McDonnell's from Hayes and Harlington. I come from there.
Oh yeah.
Let me tell you, it's full of tower blocks. Is he saying that because they had a Labour council when they were built, they were OK? But these, I think, to politicise this at this stage is pretty demeaning.
I agree. I agree with what Theresa May said, that I would like to see politicians being grown-ups about this, and this is a long-term problem. And actually, I do think that Tory cuts austerity had something to do with it. Equally, it was Labour who cut legal aid, which is another factor. So I think that cuts have a role to play, but they're not all Tory cuts. No, so I'm not making this a partisan issue.
Had an £8.6 million facelift. Whatever. How is that austerity?
Which made it.
That's £300,000 per floor. Where's the austerity there?
If you look at the refurb that they went with, they went with the cheaper version that was not what residents asked for.
As it would appear has Camden, as it would Labour, as it would appear has Sunderland, Labour. I will go on.
It was not what residents asked for. It saved about £1 million. The version that they went with, if that. This is in a climate where councils were hammered by 40% cuts. I am not politicising this by saying that austerity is part of the picture.
But isn't the answer to what you're both saying the fact that the priorities of what the money was spent on was wrong?
Absolutely.
Because safety wasn't put first, as it hasn't been in other places.
Can you let me finish? This is so important. I agree that this is not just a party political point. For me, I would love to see this go into the much longer-term issue about the way that private financing in housing initiatives, which is something that Labour was absolutely behind and introduced under Tony Blair, has led to a profit-making attitude in building social housing, which is very dangerous.
And the disdain we have for the poor in general in society.
Just let me finish.
These are all terrible generalisations.
Thank you.
When you've got something that we need to fully... I mean, it was awful. It was awful. And Kensington and Chelsea isn't a poor borough, wasn't affected by cuts. Kensington and Chelsea's got a lot of money. It's also got a lot of money.
But they wanted to keep a surplus,
But what we need to do is know the facts, as opposed to all making pronouncements on bits that we don't know are necessarily true. What we know is there was a terrible disaster, and we need to know why it happened, who was responsible.
I don't support the language of John McDonnell calling this murder. I don't think it's helpful, you know, and I'm a lawyer, so I balk at people using things, legal terms, which have real consequences wrongly. However, I don't agree with you that we should avoid thinking about anyone ever being prosecuted. You know, to me, what happened with Hillsborough this week just showed that for family, it's tragic that it took those families this long to get personal accountability from people who have real questions to answer. But it also showed that this country should be capable, through due process, of holding people to personal and possibly criminal account if they have done wrong.
But
I think that we should be open to that.
For John McDonnell not to use that language because it's such a critical time.
But I think back to your point, though, Afa, which you've been saying all along, is that the system is what is broken. And for those people who are working in that council, and even for the contractors, the problem is the pressure that would have been put on those individuals to cut costs.
I agree.
And therefore, as we know in these cases all the time, it's some mid-level person who is scapegoated.
Look at Hillsborough. Hillsborough changed sport.
Whistleblowers.
You don't know that. You don't. That's what I'm saying. Everybody's coming from a political position and blaming somebody. We don't know.
But we do know that they were told to cut costs. We know that.
We don't know their budget. But remember, my central point was the language that is being deployed, which we all
agree with you on.
And your friend David Lammy and Diane Abbott
suggesting
there's a conspiracy. There are hundreds.
And like I said,
it's not the time.
David is a close friend of mine, but I totally disagree with that.
It's just wrong.
Well, I've agreed with you on that.
But I think I can't help but wonder. I agree with you. I think that was unhelpful, but I can't help but wonder if it's a bit of a distraction to obsess over the language. The point is, we need an inquiry. I'm glad it's happening. A judge has been appointed. I think that's a good development. We do need to be level-headed about this. As I said, I would like us to look about
the judge.
Yeah, there are. I mean, it's inevitable that the judge is going to come under scrutiny. But, you know, last week you told me that the way Theresa May behaved is completely irrelevant, you know, and we should stop judging politicians on their emotional response.
And I've been drinking again.
Yeah,